All right, so a lot to unpack here. We've discussed a lot how we got here, where we're going next with Trey Lance and the quarterback situation for the 49ers. Let's get the latest. Our good friend David Lombardi. Make sure that you're following and reading his great stuff at Lombardi himself, and he does a great job, the whole crew, with the Athletic and covering the 49ers, and David joins us courtesy of the Uma guest line. What's happening? How are you?
Doing good. It's not really a day off. We're not down at the facility, but still processing everything and getting ready for the cut down on Tuesday. This is obviously a really busy time. They've got a cut from 90 to 53. You obviously have the Trey Lance, Sam Darnold news in the middle of all that, and a game tomorrow night. So never been busier, but it's all good.
Yeah, so much for an off day. I'm actually here, and Trey Lance is back at the building, and he took part in walkthrough. So Kyle, told Trey yesterday, and you and I saw each other just as it was all going down, and I had a long talk with Kyle on the field about it. He was honest with him. He just told him that's where he saw it going, and didn't care about an injury that could, change the plan. So my question is, because they're kind of scratching their head here, Trey and Sam do have the same agent, and Jimmy Sexton from CAA. It doesn't much matter, but how does that go from the coach telling the quarterback something privately, and now all of a sudden it's for all of us to consume?
Well, John Lynch today on your radio station on KNBR said that the 49ers were surprised that it got out. So if that's to be believed, then it had to have gotten out through the agent, right? That's the only way that it's possible if what John Lynch said is true. So I'm guessing that Trey told his agent, Jimmy Sexton, we said same representation as Sam Darnold, or Sexton heard through Sam Darnold. But either way, it must have gotten out like that. I don't have confirmation of that. I'm just operating by the process of deduction there.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, the 49ers wouldn't want this news out, and the agent probably would to stir it up to potentially get out of here, so I could totally see that. Where do they go from here? Because obviously there's financial implications. There's got to be potentially teams interested. Maybe, Diana Rossini said teams that they had talked to the Vikings. John Lynch this morning said that wasn't true, whatever the case may be. I mean, obviously John wants to keep leverage, so we don't know who exactly is telling the truth here, but we all know the past. But what about the future? Do they keep Trey? Do they trade Trey? Is there a market for Trey? What do you think?
Well, let's just start with the basic truth, and this is the truth the 49ers operate by, and we've seen them operate by this. At this time last year, Jimmy Garoppolo was still on the roster. People were wondering throughout all of 2022, what are they going to do? Well, the 49ers view quarterbacks as currency. It's the most important position. They view them as assets, as they should. I mean, you saw last year they had to go through so many quarterbacks to get to where they went, and then they still didn't have enough quarterbacks because of the injuries in the NFC Championship game. So they contorted themselves a little bit with the salary cap to keep Jimmy Garoppolo aboard last year, and ended up paying off for them. Trey Lance is a different situation, different variables, but there's still the same underlying truth. He's a quarterback. He is an asset for the 49ers. And, the reason that I bring that up is I don't know what the trade market for Trey Lance is right now. Before the draft, you have the 49ers would have been in a position where they would have been more receptive to accept picks in return for Trey Lance. The draft has passed us now. The 49ers are win now mode. They're looking for ways to make the football team better this year. Draft picks don't make the football team better this year. And there is a tangible value to having Trey Lance on your football team this year, especially since you ran out of quarterbacks last year. So he's quarterback depth right now, which has some value to the 49ers. So if you're going to trade him away, you better get some value back that I think has to improve you this year, right? So that means a player back, not a pick back, because if you're in win now mode, picks mean 2024 and later. They can't help you right now. You would need something that makes you tangibly better right now, which is why I think that Kyle Shanahan and especially John Lynch this morning emphasized that it's likelier that Trey Lance remains with the 49ers for this season. But a trade is obviously possible. The 49ers would just have to be, they'd have to get their price met. And the price is what makes the 49ers better right now.
And it may not be draft pick compensation, to your point. This is a thinner team. I think we'd all agree they're starters, and you take it out 15 deep on each side of the ball, so their top 30 are better than last year. But they're not deeper. They're less deep. They can't. And right now, I'm wondering who their seventh and eighth offensive lineman is. So to your point, maybe you trade Trey or talk to people about trading Trey, because Kyle was open about the fact if Trey wants to go, we're going to do right by him. And likewise, John said that exploring options. I mean, what if you traded Trey Lance not for a draft pick, but a swing offensive tackle who they may not have on their roster right now, David?
Yeah, and, that I've speculated here for a couple of weeks. Maybe the 49ers swing tackle isn't on the roster. And Chris Foerster, the offensive line coach, straight up said yesterday the 49ers need to see more from Jalen Moore, who entered camp as the top option at swing tackle. And then, behind him or competing with him, you've got Matt Pryor. But Matt Pryor hasn't even worked on the left side yet. He's only comfortable, at least as of now, at right tackle. So, you've got to definitely have some depth issues along the offensive line at a position where Colton McKivitz has to prove himself, and he's the starter at right tackle. So, yes, any championship contender can always use more O-line depth. I think I don't know who it would be, because I don't know who's going to be available. The roster cut-down deadline is going to be an unpredictable time, as it always is. But the 49ers, I expect them to be on their toes, because this team, I don't think, is as deep, spots 30 to 53, as you said, as it was last year. So expect them to be on their toes, looking for ways to make this roster better, make it deeper, coming up on this Tuesday and in the days leading up to Tuesday, maybe even the days after Tuesday. And if Trey Lance is a piece that can help the 49ers reach that goal, they have been very open in saying that they would not be afraid to part with him. But again, he's an asset, and the only way that you give up an asset is if you get something that is worthwhile in return. And I think that's the strategy that the 49ers are going to stick by.
David Lombardi at Lombardi himself. We're talking the Trey Lance situation. It's Pop and Lund here on the Sports Theater. I think what complicates it, and I agree with you on you guys on the player, because I don't know pick compensation if you can get it, because the problem becomes this: if I'm the trading team, so I'm going to redshirt Trey this year because he hasn't gotten the experience and he can't play and he's got to learn my offense. So at this juncture of camp, I'm going to take a $9.3 million cap hit. That's his cap is 9.3. So I'm going to trade for that. I'm going to sit him out all season long, and then I don't even know next year where he goes over $10 million. I don't even know if I can play him that year, and then I got to make a decision on a fifth-year option on a guy I'm not sure about. And then you want me to give you some sort of draft compensation. I would rather, if I'm a team, just speaking logically from the other team, and we always look at what the 49ers situation is, but if I'm logically another team, I'll give you a spare part where I have some depth and you don't, versus giving you a pick, because I don't know how you can match up compensation, because the team that is trading for him has to give up a lot and knows a little.
Yeah, and, so naturally, too, because Trey Lance is a developmental project, he only has 101 career pass attempts at the NFL level. Naturally, you would think that an interested team would be somebody who has more patience, who's in more of a building mode, and that type of team would be more likely to be willing to give up a depth piece along the offensive line that might be more valuable to a contender like the 49ers. This is all theory, and obviously, it's just so hard to predict who's going to be available where, because there's going to be so many moving pieces. I mean, think about it. You got every single team's got to cut from 90 to 53 on Tuesday, so you multiply that by 32 teams around the league. Be a whole lot of players, shifting around. There's going to be a massive set of musical chairs, that game's going to be played. So all the 49ers can do right now, and this is what they've set themselves up with this offseason with all their moves, all they can do is be on their toes, be ready to act, because it's going to be an unpredictable game. You want to give yourself as much option power as possible. And listen, by signing Sam Darnold, and Darnold's been really good this offseason. He's been exactly what they've wanted for that quarterback 2 spot, which is why they determined it before the final preseason game. Between signing him and signing Brandon Allen, who they like as a 2 or a 3 option as well, they actually give themselves that flexibility to not hurt that badly if they are able to find a trade partner for Trey Lance, right? The quarterback room is insulated. So you just have to enter these situations with as much option power as possible at your disposal, and then you let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, Tuesday is going to be the big day. We knew it was coming. It'll be a cut-down day in the NFL when you go from 90 down to the 53. Then the next day, the 16-player practice squad and all that. which also leads to Nick Bosa. And we heard John Lynch this morning on the morning show, David, and he sounded agitated a little bit with the slowness of the negotiations. So if you would, enlighten our audience on how Tuesday could be a possible tipping point as far as, putting your 53 together, trying to rework Nick's contract. And then also, one thing we're not talking about because the comps have been Aaron Donald, obviously, the highest paid non-quarterback, highest paid defensive player in the league, or T.J. Watt as far as, outside guys. You got a guy in Kansas City that's a two-time Super Bowl champion that does play on the D-line, in Chris Jones, who has been very outspoken about his contract negotiation and threatening to hold out until the middle of the year. So explain why Tuesday is important. And are the Bosa negotiations tied to what Chris Jones is doing with the Chiefs?
Yeah, so on Tuesday, the 49ers are going to cut from 90 to 53, and the league's rules shift into another phase. In the offseason, only the 51 most valuable cap hits count against the salary cap. Then when you build your 53, you've got to be under the cap with not just your 53, but your practice squad guys, right? They're going to be signing those guys in the subsequent days, and the injured reserve cap hits and all that. Everything has to be under the salary cap. So it typically gets a little bit more expensive to fill out a team then. And Nick Bosa's current 2023 cap hit is projected to be about $18 million. They plan on the 50-year option, or he's under contract for the 50-year option. When the 49ers do finally execute this deal, it will almost certainly bring the cap number down for this year, because when you execute a long-term deal, you stretch the cap hit out over the life of the contract. So they can actually save short-term money, which will help them finalize and build this 53-man roster. I think they have enough flexibility. They can do enough different stuff to where it's not mandatory that they sign Nick Bosa by Tuesday, but I think it would certainly help. And, I mean, not just from a financial standpoint, it would just help from a morale standpoint. As you said, John Lynch sounded a little irritated. He said that, and this is true, the 49ers have never dealt with the holdout that's extended this long under this regime. The regular season is creeping up. You want to get this done. You want to, lock, load, and be ready to go. And from a financial perspective, it will help the 49ers once it's done. And obviously from a team building perspective, it's going to help when it's done. You are right. We used to think of these negotiations in terms of defensive ends and defensive tackles being two separate positions, but Aaron Donald broke that scale. Aaron Donald, as a defensive tackle, when he signed the highest contract out of any defensive lineman, made it to where, okay, well, now Nick Bosa is looking up at Aaron Donald's contract. People didn't expect that. And Chris Jones, being the two-time Super Bowl winner, being an elite interior pass rusher like Aaron Donald, is probably going to be at the very top of these discussions too when you look at the average per year list. So that is a whole other kind of looming thing in these Nick Bosa contract negotiations. He probably wants to sign. He probably wants to be at the top of the list, but it also has to be mindful of what Chris Jones might do. So I wonder if that is slowing things down. I do know that this is a lot of money. It's a big jump from where T.J. Watt is to where Aaron Donald is. But since Nick Bosa is the reigning defensive player of the year, he is entitled to be, a hard negotiator, or Brian Ayrault is entitled to be a hard negotiator on his behalf.
David, great stuff, man. We'll see you tomorrow night. We look forward to the regular season. I'm sure we'll talk to you throughout, but great work as always. We appreciate it.
Yep, thank you. We'll see you soon.
Take the rest of the day off.